SCP-3333, the Tower. Horror is one of the pillars of the SCP universe. Many articles are well known for their horrific nature, and SCP-3333 is no different. SCP-3333 is an anomaly within the Suntop Fire Lookout in the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest in the state of Washington. In the roof of the lookout, there's a trapdoor which leads to another copy of the lookout with another trapdoor. This is only the beginning of SCP-3333's anomalous nature, and we'll soon discover more in the exploration logs. As you enter the first trapdoor, the surrounding area changes. The topology is identical to the normal area, but no human or plant life have been observed. Climbing up more trapdoors will also cause the lookout itself to extend, along with the stairs alongside the lookout, which always lead down to the ground. SCP-3333 was first discovered while the lookout was being restored and repaired following some volcanic activity near Mount Rainier. When the Foundation went to investigate the trapdoor, they found a padlock, but no key, so it was opened by force. This brings us to our first exploration log, where a D-Class, who is being supervised by Dr. Williams, is instructed to climb up the trapdoors. Upon initially entering the anomaly on the second floor, the D-Class remarks that it's empty, but continues to climb up the floors for an hour. Dr. Williams then instructs him to try the door and go outside. As the D-Class opens the door, a strong wind blasts through into the lookout, throwing the D-Class backwards. He gets up and struggles, but is able to close the door, and Williams advises him to stay inside for now. The D-Class has been traveling upwards for 3 hours now, and the sound of wind is audible in the background. He was given a cognition test every 10 floors, but there hasn't been any significant changes as he climbs higher. He's reached the 180th floor now, and he stops to eat some rations. Williams orders another cognition test when the D-Class asks what the cognition tests are even for. Williams admits that it's really to test how thin the air is up here, as thin air would cause the D-Class's brain to slow down. But these tests indicate that the D-Class is not actually physically ascending as much as expected. We skip ahead another 4 hours, and the D-Class notes that the sun outside is setting and decides to set up camp and sleep through the night. The next morning, upon ascending again, the D-Class noticed 2 small figures on a ridge southwest of the lookout. They're standing still, and are only visible from the D-Class's perspective. Williams says to use his binoculars to get a better view of them, but as he tries, the figures disappear out of sight behind the ridge. The D-Class remarks that they saw the reflection in binoculars, and one of them even pointed directly at him. Now on the 345th floor, it's nighttime and the D-Class sets up camp for the night once again. The next morning, he forgets to turn his camera and microphone back on until Williams reminds him. He also was expressing feelings of anxiety and unease, and was asking for the exploration to end. He claims that something is not right, and mentions writing on the walls which Williams denies seeing. William insists that he continues, however, and the D-Class begrudgingly complies, although he continues to ask for the mission to end. Now on the 520th level, the layout of the lookout has drastically changed, with multiple copies connected to one another in a grid. None of the copies contain a trapdoor, and there doesn't seem to be any natural light outside, leaving it completely dark. The D-Class begins to panic, but Williams tries to calm him down and reminds him to turn on his lights. Unfortunately, his lights fail to turn on, and it's revealed that the battery compartments are empty. Strangely, even his backup batteries are also missing. The D-Class claims to see something, however it's difficult to make anything out through the camera feed. He begs for permission to descend the tower, but Williams insists that if he does, he will be executed. After this, the camera and microphone feed cut out. It's unclear as to the fate of the D-Class. Clearly there is some sort of threat within the tower, so the Foundation sends in an MTF consisting of a 5-man team with standard-issue survival gear and recording equipment. They ensure to double and even triple check every agent's batteries and backup batteries. The team begins to ascend the tower with the sound of wind outside slowly decreasing as they continue. After several hours, they reach the point where the D-Class attempted to go outside and decide to try it for themselves. But when the team opens the door, there is no burst of wind, and an agent, is even able to easily walk outside. The team decides to exit the lookout and explore up here. They find the surrounding area to be exactly the same as the normal area, aside from no plant or human life signs. After several hours of finding nothing, they decide to return to the lookout. Williams is theorizing that if the whole world is similarly barren, it would probably account for the strong wind patterns, but it wouldn't explain the presence of oxygen. The team continues to ascend for several days, but at a much slower pace than the D-class was. They're camping each night and having no notable encounters. None of the team members are reporting anything out of the ordinary. On the fourth day, the team reaches the top floor, and this time with all of their batteries and flashlights intact. They decide to start exploring the grid, which is connected by exterior walkways. A team member pulls up a board and throws a glow stick down there, but he sees nothing. There is nothing but darkness below them, and the glow stick doesn't even seem to hit a bottom. They tried firing a signal flare into the air, which revealed a similar expanse of darkness with no ceiling. The team doesn't find the D-class's body or any of his equipment initially, so they spread out to explore the grid for an hour. Finally, one of the agents stumbles across the D-class's empty backpack and sees no signs of a struggle. When trying to relay all of this information across the radio, they notice one of the agents isn't responding and is missing. Their microphone and camera feed have gone dark, so the team begins to search for him. During the search, two of the team suddenly fall over, as a faint dripping sound is heard, and both their cameras and microphones have cut out. Another agent falls over, and his feeds cut out as well. Now there's only a single member of the team remaining. He begins to panic, stating that there's something in the room with them. Suddenly, the feeds of the other members switch back on one by one. One of them says he tripped on something on the ground but is fine. Upon checking in, however, they report the incorrect call signs. The last member's feed also cuts out randomly, only for it to reactivate shortly afterwards. They say that they saw it too, something spectral. The rest of the team chimes in, saying they also see something that is not right, but the camera feeds show nothing unusual. As they discuss what they see, they first claim it is a castle, then a mountain, then a ghostly mountain, and finally a flaming mountain, a tower of smoke and ash. One of the agents orders a retreat, and the team begins to rapidly descend the lookout. A few days later, they finally return to base camp, but display a definite unwillingness to re-enter the lookout. The MTF insisted on not returning to the tower, so the Foundation brings in a single specialist, codenamed Nullwalker. Nullwalker is a counter-memetic specialist who is deaf, blind, and mute. She's able to communicate through a modified signaling system that is embedded in her hand. The reason she's such a good counter-memetic specialist is because usually memetic effects occur through being seen or heard, making her essentially immune to many of them. She's been ascending the lookout for a few hours now, when she notes that someone is outside, watching her. But she then corrects herself to say that it isn't watching, but it's doing something unknown. After 12 hours of climbing, Willimus asks if she needs to rest, but she says someone is still nearby, and that it is not safe to stop. Instead, she takes 100 milligrams of amphetamine and continues. She asks Williams if she can see something outside, and as she turns the camera, a flick of motion is seen as something outside the window ducks down narrowly out of view. Nullwalker then simply says that they know, and begins to rapidly ascend the tower. As she does, more flickers of motion are visible on the camera outside of the lookout, and there are rustling sounds heard occasionally over the wind. Williams tells her to retreat, but Nullwalker refuses, and continues to rapidly ascend the lookout for another hour, where she finally reaches the top. She says she can sense that there's blood here and no light, but since she forgets to turn on her flashlight, the camera is unable to see what is happening. A loud crashing sound is heard in the distance, and she comes a corpse. As she bends down to investigate it, more rustling sounds can be heard, but this time much louder and closer, along with several squishing sounds. Nullwalker feels the body and finds some blood, noting that the muscles are smooth and too soft, and then feels hard metal. The rustling sounds grow louder around her until they are one continuous hum. She mentions metal and words before a large thud is heard, and she signals only gibberish. She then says that the lights are out. And where is the light? She said there's a mountain, and that she needs to come down. Suddenly, her flashlight is turned on, and the camera reveals a pile of muscles, organs, and bones in advanced decomposition. Nullwalker is clutching onto a dog tag belonging to one of the members of the MTF. This is strange considering that all of the MTF reportedly made it down and out of the lookout safely. The rest of this exploration log is expunged from the record, and it's not until the next addendum that we are informed that the entities from 3333 either killed or impersonated all members present at the temporary base camp set up by the Foundation. It's revealed that they had continued the facade of exploring SCP-3333 for 1 month afterwards, continually requesting manpower and equipment. This was until a supply assistant managed to send an emergency message containing the third exploration log. Recontainment teams later arrived at the outpost to find it abandoned. It determined that a total of 50 personnel were lost. So it appears as if there are some sort of anomalous entities within the lookout who are capable of murdering and impersonating humans. Their objectives are unknown, and now they are free to explore the world. Because of this, a special task force was set up to track down all of these instances. Later, the Foundation received a message from Dr. Williams' cell phone. It's unclear if the message was sent from within SCP-3333 or not. The message contains the fourth and final exploration log. This log is from the perspective of Dr. Williams, as she apparently fled into the lookout to escape from the now impersonated MTF team. The footage starts with Williams climbing upwards and breathing heavily, as gunshots can be heard down below. Eventually, she needs to stop to rest and blocks off the lower trap door using a chair. She's covered in blood and holding a handgun when she begins to cry. She says to the camera that the entities masquerading as the MTF had tricked them. She says they spoke with just the right amount of vagueness, and no one would argue with a seasoned MTF that decided to retreat from an anomaly. As she says this, the trapdoor below her begins to rattle as someone is trying to get in. A voice calls out to Williams, telling her that they are a different MTF that received a distress call coming from this outpost. They say that they were attacked by the personnel assigned here and demand that Williams let them in. Williams doesn't believe them, however, and the voice calls out, saying that they will treat her as an enemy agent if she doesn't let them in. She screams for them to stay back, and the trapdoor begins to be forced open. Several fingers can be seen poking out of the trapdoor, and so Williams quickly runs over to stomp on them. There's a tearing sound heard as the fingers are pulled back beneath the trapdoor, and Williams fires 2 shots downwards before climbing to the next floor. As she makes her ascent, she's sure to block off each previous trapdoor before stopping to vomit and cry again. She keeps this up for another 12 hours non-stop before collapsing into unconsciousness for 2 hours. She wakes up screaming and remarks that she's still here and that she is thirsty. At this point, it begins to rain outside and Williams laughs before stepping outside to drink some of the rain. After continuing her ascent, she hears a knock at the door and stops to point her gun. Then she hears a knock from the other side of the lookout and turns to see the D-Class standing outside the door. He asks Williams to let him in, but the doctor continues to point her gun at him as she says that the D-Class never referred to her as Doc. Upon hearing this, the D-Class's face goes completely slack, and it says that it never really watched him. Ever since Williams was a child, though, it had always thought that she had very pretty eyes. This is rather disturbing, as it suggests that these entities can also observe humans throughout their entire lifetime, waiting for them. The D-Class punches the window on the door with his fists, drawing no blood upon doing so, and reaches in to open the door. As it charges Williams, she opens fire, and the entity collapses to the ground, writhing in pain. The D-Class's skin only partially follows the movements of the writhing, as it's not perfectly attached to whatever is inside. Williams continues to open fire as the entity flips over and begins to crawl away with its arms flapping behind it, as if they were made of rubber. Whatever is wearing the D-Class's skin appears to be centered in its chest, as the rest of the skin flaps around it. Williams shoots it twice in the chest and a loud tearing sound is heard, followed by loud, dry thud. William vomits again and points the camera at the D-Class, revealing a large black pile slumped against the broken window with clear gelatinous blood oozing out of it. Whatever the entity was, it appears to have had a thick, semi-transparent wings. Williams attempts to vomit for a second time, but then rapidly and quietly begins speaking about humans searching on a deep level for enlightenment, comparing it to heights. And here she is on a castle in the sky, or a mountain in the air. As she nears the top of the lookout, she mentions Nullwalker and says that she finally did it. She turns on her flashlight at the top floor, but there is no sound or external light present. She tries to call out to see if anyone would reply, but still only silence. She laments how there is nothing up here, and that there never was. She sits down, but as she does, footsteps can be heard in the distance approaching her. The steps are uneven and rough, slamming down with each step. The figure previously known as Nullwalker enters the frame. Her flesh is unevenly stretched out with patches of it missing entirely, revealing the writhing entity inside her. Her head is limp, and she jerkily moves around the room with little sense of purpose or direction. Williams is taken back by the smell and calls out to her real name, Annette. The entity swivels to look towards Williams, and something inside of her moves towards her head, raising it there. It attempts to speak, but only a wet, gurgling sound can be heard. The entity doesn't seem capable of utilizing Annette's body the same way that she could, and Williams calls out to her again while breaking into tears. She tries to shoot the entity multiple times with her empty firearm, to no avail. She drops the gun and falls to her knees as the entity approaches her. The entity inside of her chest is writhing as if to escape. Williams says that she is sorry as the flesh of Annette is ripped apart and a barbed stinger shoots out of her and hits Williams, causing her to fall to the ground. A large black entity can be seen emerging from the massacred remains of Annette, with large semi-translucent wings and a large sucker appendage on its chest. It has no visible eyes, and its skin is extremely thin to the point where some organs can be seen through some viscous internal fluid, but no bones can be seen. It approaches the paralyzed Williams and thrusts its chest appendage into the wound made by its stinger. A sucking sound can be heard as chunks of semi-liquefied organs and bone emerge out of the back of the entity, leaving behind only an empty shell of skin. The entity contorts its body and slips into the wound, causing the skin of Williams to jerk and stretch as it fits into it. The skin of Dr. Williams stands up and turns off the camera.